Who's your favorite serial killer?
Oh, there's so many. Only you would. I don't have a favorite serial killer, you sociopath.
Oh, I could rank my top 25 in order right now.
Okay, that's not the next video series. Our top 20 serial killers. I'm not being part of that.
Okay. You strike me as a Dahmer guy. Let's get into it.
Yes.
Zodiac.
The Zodiac killer has come to San Francisco.
Another letter.
School children make nice targets.
He gave himself a name.
I love it just so much. I'm really excited in the context of this top 10 discussion because we've been joking offline about how much my top 10 is going to change.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I'm adding and taking away, and I feel like I got a whole new movie coming in that's going to be number 6. There's all this stuff, so I'm really rearranging. But my top 5, I'm pretty confident that these are going to stay put because I love these movies so much. So we're getting into the real meaty juiciness of this list. And Zodiac is just a great entry. And for those of you who don't know, you should watch Zodiac. It's amazing. It's about the famed Zodiac killer who terrorized really all of California from 1969 on through up into the 80s. It was one of the most famous unsolved serial killer cases of all time. Probably the most famous unsolved serial killer case. So it follows the Dave Toschi and Paul Avery and Robert Graysmith, 3 men primarily who worked to solve the case. And Keith loved it.
Here's my expert review. Meh. Like
You're such an idiot.
I know. Because we're gonna get into it on this one because I'm not gonna say it's a bad movie. I would never say that. Qualifier out of the way. I don't think it's a bad movie by any means. Here's what I do think. What bothers me about the film is that it has no true protagonist, in my humble opinion. It follows the story of these 3 groups of people to not even solve this murder. I can get to the end. That's a whole nother portion of it. But what really bothers me is that it's no one's story. If it's anyone's story, it's the Zodiac story, almost sort of reminiscent to Infinity War and Thanos. Like, it's his story. It's not the Avengers story. He's the sort of thread. Where the Zodiac is the thread, but we don't know him. We don't meet him. We have no idea who he is, for 90% of the film. It's not from his perspective. It's from these 3 sort of not random, I shouldn't say that, but randomly shifting gears from one perspective to another. So we follow a little bit of this, and then that ends. And then we follow a little bit of this, and then sort of that ends. And in the end of the film, like, we follow Jake Gyllenhaal's sort of arc most thoroughly, I would guess, but because of the nature of not having a protagonist and the nature of how the story is told in such segments, it just dips to black and goes 6 months later, dips to black 3 years later, dip to black 1 week later, an hour later. Like, that coupled with that version of storytelling, it made a 2.5 hour, 2:45 film feel like just an epic. There was no sense of like a natural progression to the film. It just felt like someone reading the case file. It just felt like this is a case file. Here's what the police went through. Here's the sort of twists and turns of the case. Not really from a film standpoint or an entertainment standpoint. It felt very accurate and it felt very true to probably what happened. But that goes to my original point of, I just feel like there should have been a documentary. A documentary, I want to sit down and I want to learn in sort of an entertaining, interesting fashion. I'm sort of prepared for that when I go through a documentary. A film, I have a sort of a different end game to watching a film. I have different reasons why I watch a film versus a documentary. Subtly, but different. So it felt like more of a dramatized documentary than it did like a real film for me for those reasons.
Okay, well, you said a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot. There's too many things for me to respond
it's too
to.
intelligent.
I'm just so furious. You made a lot of points, all of which I really disagree with, and I'm going to try to nail them down one by one.
Please do. I don't know how you could disagree, but I'd love to hear it.
Well, I mean, one, maybe the biggest thing is the structure of the film as a whole is unique. And I think that is one of the defining characteristics of the film, where you interpret that as not really having a protagonist,
Yep.
which I disagree, because I think it's pretty clear that Jake Gyllenhaal, Robert Graysmith, is the protagonist of this film. I don't know how you could draw any conclusion about the Zodiac like Thanos. Thanos, they really dug into his motivations and his backstory and all this stuff. They don't do anything like that.
No,
with
I
the
know
Zodiac.
they don't. That's my point. I feel like that's the missed opportunity. The main character is the Zodiac, not these other guys. But because of the
that's
nature
not
of how
true.
it's conflicting ideas. I'm saying they didn't do that when it feels like that was the smarter approach if this is how we're going to tell the story. Because I'll let you finish, but I strongly disagree with what you're saying.
It's not the story of the Zodiac. It's the story of these men, these three men particularly, who are obsessed with tracking him down, and it doesn't end fruitfully. And that's another reason why I think it's very intentional. It's very intentional that there's not a clear arc or a clear resolution. And that is the thing that was the biggest complaint, I think, for general audiences with this film, was that, well, it doesn't end the way a movie should end, quote unquote. There's no transit, there's no arc, there's no clear arc. Well, it's like, well, yeah, because it was this, the way you describe the film is the way the investigation was for these people.
Right. That's my point.
It was long.
So make it a
was
documentary. So that's a documentary. It's not.
No.
It's not. I think it works better as a documentary, not as a film, because just shifting gears randomly throughout the film to, like, we're going to be in this person's perspective and then this person's perspective and then we're going to come back to this person. We might
I disagree with that. That's like saying if in any movie you focus on a supporting character for a minute, we're just from their perspective now.
No,
so the entire film has to be
minute,
from one person.
There are large swaths of the film where you don't hear or see anything from Robert Downey Jr. or hear or see anything from Jake Gyllenhaal or hear or see. Name me another film that is like that is structured like that. Name me another film that has three main characters that all work separately and independently from each other. It doesn't exist.
That's not true at all.
Name one, please. Tell me I'm wrong by naming one.
Any Paul Thomas Anderson movie? I mean, any ensemble film where you're focusing on multiple characters and you go into, I mean, I look at Boogie Nights, I look at Magnolia, I look at The Master.
No, I'm not saying they can't be in scenes, but there is the protagonist leads your film, and the wants and desires and goals of that main character, even if it's an ensemble.
So you can't have multiple protagonists? There can't be multiple protagonists in a film?
No, but they share more commonality than these stories do, than this film does. All of it equals just like, I'm gonna read you the case file of what happened, and that to me does not make a great film. It doesn't. That doesn't make a great film on its own. But when you combine that, it's hard to argue. I think that if you just read the case files of the Zodiac, that wouldn't be interesting. I'm not saying it was not interesting.
Then you add in David Fincher's direction, which might be the best working right now. You add in performances from top to bottom that are fantastic, interesting writing. The maybe my favorite tonal, atmospheric filmmaking ever. Like there's so much. I guess this would come to the point where it's like, sure, if I wanted to be generous to the points you're trying to make right now, I could say, sure.
I love your charity.
I can see what you're saying, and maybe in the hands of a lesser filmmaker, then it would be boring. It's not entirely unlike the Social Network, that film, also directed by David Fincher, where you think, yeah, if we're gonna have a bunch of geeky kids talking about computer algorithms all day, this is going to be really boring.
I'm
but
not
no,
saying
because
it's
David
boring.
Fincher is an amazing
I never said
director.
the film was boring. I want to be clear. I never said it was boring. That was never my criticism. It lacks a general focus and sort of narrative structure to make it a really good film. It's more of a documentary where they're just going over the case files, like an ABC 2020 special.
Can't you see it as sort of a character study, particularly of Robert Graysmith, Jake Gyllenhaal, and to a secondary extent, Mark Ruffalo, Dave Toschi, as being as the way something like this can consume a person and take over someone's life, and these pursuits for knowledge? Because I was going to say justice, but it's not even justice necessarily. I think it's just I love what Jake Gyllenhaal just like, I have to do this.
Yeah, I have to know.
And I love that Mark Ruffalo's character knows he should be out by now, but every time Jake Gyllenhaal comes back, he's like, okay, I'll give you 3 seconds because they consume, to me, it's more of a character study about those people.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying, I take, that's really the main takeaway, is that the power and compellingness, if that's a word, of this person and this case is just hooks people, and look at the sort of gravitational pull the Zodiac killer had on people, not just the people he murdered, but it, almost had its own orbit. I definitely took that away. But you can do that with following one character. But I mean, I guess I know your argument is I don't need you for this. I'll just have the argument for us. Is you're saying that's a unique way to tell the story, and that's a different way. Nothing has to be so traditional. And I get that, but I feel like it wasn't that part wasn't executed well enough for me.
Yeah, I don't know. This episode's over.
You can still
quit.
Yeah, to me that's a big win for me. Thank you. But
No,
you can like it. You
I
can
don't
like
wanna...
the film. I like plenty of shitty films, but you can like it. That's what I don't like.
Yeah, David Fincher, classic shitty film director.
Yeah, I didn't say he was a shitty director. Everybody's got their voices.
Less than 10 minutes, we'll be in a taxi back here. And I just have her just like this. Just breaking that shit. Just.
I want to talk about Robert Downey Jr. for a second.
Yeah.
I like Robert Downey Jr. I think he's talented. I think he's a talented actor, and I enjoy most of his career, for the most part. He's had a very long, successful career, ups and downs personally, but I enjoy him as an actor. The more that I thought about it, I wanted to pose the question, because I don't even know where I stand on it. So I asked the question to you. How good of an actor do you think he is? Sub-question, do you think he has a real range to his acting ability? Because I do think he's very good, but how wide is his goodness? He's very thin. That's kind of what I was leaning toward too, but I was curious what you thought.
No, it's funny you bring that up. I had the same thought in this movie, and I too really like Robert Downey Jr. But for the last 12 or 15 years, that just means you like Iron Man. you think he's good at playing Iron Man, and I do think he's good at playing it. This is actually really funny. Let me make this about me. No, as I was watching this movie just today, I thought, yeah, Robert Downey Jr. is really good, and I think Robert Downey Jr. is the best version of my acting ability that I could ever attain. Like his roles and the way that he plays, because he has such a thin range, but where he's money is when he's being kind of cocky and a little smarmy, and he's he's
cool.
He's a half a step away from winking at the camera. Like he knows. Yeah, I'm funny. This is funny. And I just feel that is his wheelhouse. I think he's really good at that. Tony Stark is a playboy who's a little smarter and chops other people down. And even pre-Tony Stark, even in some of the 90s movies, I think of U.S. Marshals, the sequel to The Fugitive with Tommy Lee Jones and Wesley Snipes, and Robert Downey Jr. is a supporting character, and he's got that kind of slimy. He's a little slimy.
Yeah.
And I feel like he's like that in just about everything. And I thought that in this, I think he's pretty good, but he's still very much Robert Downey Jr. Yeah, and I think he gets worse as it goes. I think his performance is, I don't want to say a weak part, because it's not a weak part, but it is a little distracting from because the rest of the film, which we can talk about, is very hyper real, very intentionally, and you clearly don't like that much. You felt a bit more like a documentary, but the way it was shot and the way it was directed and all that stuff I read a lot about was very much to make it feel almost like a documentary. And Robert Downey Jr. is doing the most in terms of performance. So I think that's almost a little distracting.
Yeah, that's what it felt like to me. He feels like when he's Robert Downey Jr., he's pretty good.
Yeah.
But I don't know how much far out he can go. The film that I think of is Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. I really like that movie. I love Val Kilmer. And I thought they had a great chemistry. And like he's, again, a very similar. Then I started thinking about all the roles that he has. And I was like, he's kind of, my favorite roles are he's like that. So I just don't know. So I was curious what you thought.
It's like he's been playing Tony Stark his whole career.
And then they found
yeah, and so now as we look back on his career, we're like, he's just doing Tony Stark. He's just waiting for this moment. Mark Ruffalo and Jake Gyllenhaal feel like they're in this world.
Yeah.
And Robert Downey Jr. feels like he's Robert Downey Jr. in the 70s.
Yeah. I was surprised at how much I did like Mark Ruffalo. I found myself believing. Like I lost track of, because I've seen Mark Ruffalo in so many different films, and again, so notably as the Hulk recently. I can't unsee Tony Stark. I can't unsee Tony Stark. I got lost in his performance and his character. It was very, very believable. Felt very natural. I thought both of their performances, the best way I can describe it, I feel like they were super clean. Both the Gyllenhaal and Ruffalo. I just very, like, perfectly stated.
I think Ruffalo is he nails that gruffness without being a caricature.
I wanted to ask you about Zodiac.
Well, I appreciate the interest, but we don't discuss open cases.
Which I think it would have been really easy to do, because that character he's playing is a real person, obviously, who was a very famous detective. They loosely based Dirty Harry on him. He was like a celebrity detective. And I think Bullet maybe too. Like they mentioned that in the film. They say Steve McQueen got the way he wears his gun in the movie Bullet from looking at Dave Toschi, the detective. He was a famous face. So I think it could have been easy to see old videos of him and start being like, I'm Dave Toschi, and really overperform it. But no, they nail it. The main thing I've always loved about this movie, which puts it at number 5 on my list, is, as I sort of referenced to earlier, the general atmosphere of the film, I think, is really unmatched. The way the film feels, the way it draws you into the world is very, it's really flawless, I think. And that's done through the music and the cinematography especially. I was reading about how they intentionally almost kept the visuals and shot on equipment that almost makes it intentionally visually, I don't want to say bland, but not, we're trying to avoid big sexy visuals because they wanted it to feel very real, like a historical account. And I think that the whole vibe of the movie, in some parts, is just really like the scary parts are really scary and nothing really happens.
Yeah.
And that's why that's another reason I really like the film, is not that much happens in terms of action. And that was, I think, another, general audience moron Keith Macri takeaway from this film, is that it was, nothing happens. But so much happens in those really terrifying moments when he goes to the basement of that guy's house. That to me is almost the climax of the film, and nothing happens.
And who is that guy? I don't understand. I didn't really understand. Like, super tense. You're 1,000% right. I was on edge at that moment as I'm watching it. I was nervous. Very well executed scene, and that guy's performance, super creepy. Like, he nailed it too. Whoever that guy is, I don't know his name. But who was that guy? And then there was like, is there someone upstairs? And he was like, do you want to find out? Like, super creepy.
Yeah.
But was there someone upstairs? Like,
It seemed like it. I think that's part of the point, is that there was so many, in this case, there were so many potential, like, good suspects. There were a lot of weird people. And I think introducing that character from the film's perspective and going there and really having even the climactic moment of the film be in this random one-off character's house is another way of showing that, yes, the filmmakers clearly believe that the killer is Arthur Lee Allen.
Yeah.
But there's no way of knowing that. There's other good possibilities out there. And I think that scene served that purpose. Are you interested in true crime stories or criminology aspects or anything like that? Because
I'm interested to a degree.
Okay. Well, because I feel like that has to color how you would approach this film or view this film. I think because I love just conversations around this subject matter and the investigative nature of trying to solve a crime. And I love that a citizen, in this case Robert Graysmith, the cartoonist, is consumed by that to the point of, it destroys his family.
That's so sad. Yeah, it was. You love movies that have no positive whatsoever. Like, there's just such a theme with the movies that you like, is that they're sad, and then they just end sadder. Like, they just there's no resolution.
No, this one is
film.
so satisfying. That's what I don't get. I feel like people don't get about, because this movie, people talk about the ending. It's like, nothing happens. There's no resolution. To me,
I know what you're gonna say, and I just disagree so much. But go ahead.
I think it might be like the most satisfying ending ever after multiple viewings is him having that stare down with the guy in the hardware store. It's such a different kind of way to do an ending where, nothing happens. They just look at each other. Yeah, but there's so much. And the way that actor, John Carroll Lynch, is just a phenomenal actor, the guy who plays Arthur Lee Allen.
Yeah.
And as he looks and acknowledges what he sees, he realizes who this guy is, realizes what he's doing there, and you watch behind his eyes shift, and it's like, okay, that's enough. Jake Gyllenhaal said, I just have to look him in the eyes. And he did that. Like, it's beautiful. Fuck you.
I agree. It's a good scene when it happened. It's a really well performed scene. You're right. His performance is very good. The guy, whatever his name is, I don't do names, but he's very good. He's very good, and I like the scene. The film is telling you that this is the killer without committing to it because they can't. They probably legally can't be like, this guy did it, but they have to be like, we all think it is. And it's dissatisfying. It's dissatisfying as a viewer to have a very, very little closure.
But I disagree, because I think the character gets closure, and by extension, the viewers, we should get some sense of closure. The most closure we could possibly get in this story, we get, because there is no closure.
Right.
We'll
That's why it
never
just
know.
should have been a documentary. It's like, I don't need closure in a documentary, and the killer's still out there. I mean, the fact that they wrapped it up with just pages of notes. And just to fill you in on the rest of what happened, here's 6 pages of just paragraphs.
What's so funny is you say a documentary doesn't need closure, and I hate it when documentaries don't have closure. So that's really funny. It's like an opposite.
I don't know. I don't think you need closure in a documentary. That's just where the story today ends. But
Yeah, then don't make the fucking documentary if there's not. I hate, because there's so many true crime docs
That's
that they're
insane.
just like, here's all this stuff, and it builds it up in this really suspenseful way, and and this person got killed and raped, and this person got murdered in their sleep, and you're like, okay, and here's a suspect, and here's another suspect, and then it goes, if you have any leads, please call the Fresno PD, and it's like, well, what the fuck, why are we watching this? But in a narrative film like this, I'm okay with that, because
I couldn't disagree more.
Because you're getting more of a creative interpretation, and you're watching art. Whereas in a documentary, I'm watching the documentary for information. and now at the end of the documentary you're going to ask me to solve the case? Like, no, bro. Like, in a movie directed by David Fincher, I get a David Fincher film, which is phenomenal.
You're nuts. That is nuts. It
are
should
out
be
of your
the
mind.
complete opposite. If I have the time and the wherewithal to craft a story, because that's really what I care most about in films. I mean, I'll include comedies. I won't even, it's like any film, is I care about the storytelling. How are you telling me this story? It's as old as the tale is time. Like, everyone sit around a campfire. I got a story to tell you. Like, I want you to tell me a story. And then if I just stopped midway through and just go, yeah, he's still out there.
Midway through.
And he's still out there.
Midway through.
Like, but then no, the guy died of a heart attack, and then the other guy died from some disease. Like, it's just like, there's just so much more. Like, you just stopped and you're just like, oh yeah, and we don't know who did all that stuff, like, officially. I kind of think it was that.
That's the whole point. That's what these guys were consumed with. The characters are consumed with this, and now the film transfers that to you, the viewer. So now you can feel frustrated.
No, but that's what a documentary should do. That's what a documentary should do. Not a documentary is presenting what it has to date. Here's what I have. I'm collecting it. I'm presenting it to you for you can weigh in on it. You know, your opinion. Here you go. A film is a crafted, curated story with a beginning, middle, and an end. Like, it's just to be left hanging.
You want your stories the way that Stewie mockingly reads the story structure to Brian.
Nice little narrative, beginning, middle, and end. Some friends become enemies, some enemies become friends. Yeah. At the end, your main character is richer for the experience. Yeah. Yeah.
I need one protagonist, and I need to clearly understand his dilemma by page 10, and then in the second act, boy, does it get rough.
It could be a female. 2020. It could be a female. But one common goal, never mind, we don't have to continue to beat this horse into the ground as if you are continue to be wrong. He's wrong. He's just wrong. It meanders because there's no common thread. It's just like, we're over here now, and now we're over here.
There's no common thread. They're chasing the Zodiac killer. That is the thread.
But they're going in all different directions. They're in all different directions. And even within the police force, there's like 3 different branches of police force. Like, I don't get real close to any one character because of that. Gyllenhaal is the closest I get because the last 30 minutes or so is about him. But before that, he's not that much of a part of the film. He's barely a side character.
You're out
in
of
the
your mind.
first hour and a half to 2 hours of the film.
The movie starts with him. During the opening credits, it's him. He's
not even allowed to talk in meetings.
I know, but that doesn't matter.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. You're introducing your protagonist.
No one takes him seriously.
If you're saying it's his film, which I think you did to put words in your mouth, if it's his film, it's about him and his story. We don't really get to know him until he goes on that first date, which is 2 hours into the film.
Protagonist. I wouldn't say it's his film. And the filmmakers also, I was reading about, made a concerted effort too, that they didn't want to get into deep backstory of any of their 3 main characters because this movie is about how they reacted to the case. And they don't want to get bogged down with trying to spoon feed the audience about like what was he like as a boy?
I don't care about that. I don't care about that. It just feels like they were working in silos. It'd be one thing if they were working together, but they were not working together. No 3 of those pockets of people, those groups of people, the police are obviously working on their own, the newspaper is operating on its own, and the Gyllenhaal is operating on its own.
Yeah, but they intersect.
Yes, but that's why it seems random. You have no idea when and where and why they do intersect. They just do. They just do.
About? What do you mean you don't know where, when, or why? Gyllenhaal and Robert Downey Jr. work together at the newspaper, and no one takes Gyllenhaal seriously until Robert Downey Jr. starts to realize this weirdo might kind of be onto something. And Downey Jr. and Ruffalo interact several times throughout, where they are at odds. And Ruffalo doesn't
gets at odds with everyone. They all get together and break up, and it just. I just keep saying the same thing. It doesn't feel streamlined. It feels like a presentation of information that would be better suited in a documentary than a narrative feature film.
Okay.
Is that true?
One thing that I think is really funny, which you'll appreciate,
Okay.
is speaking back to the fact that this film wasn't a tremendous financial success immediately, is you know what film beat this movie in the opening weekend at the box office?
Oh, I can't wait for this.
Wild Hogs. The point I always make that people are stupid is never better illustrated than Wild Hogs beating Zodiac.
They got
at
a
the box
good
office.
demographic. If I remember, and I don't, I want to say it was Tim Allen, Martin Lawrence, John Travolta, and maybe William H. Macy. Like the four. There was like four.
Oh, you nailed it. Oh, this is
Right?
Oh God, Keith,
Right?
you should be embarrassed.
I think I'm a fucking genius.
I would have gotten Tim Allen and John Travolta. I wouldn't have gotten the other two.
I know every film Martin Lawrence is in. There's not a film I don't know. I didn't mention the thing that I think this film does the best. The
Great.
best part of this film, I think, is the writing. I really thought the writing was super sharp. It was the best way. Are you drinking like Windex? What is that?
Man, I'm just staying hydrated.
It looks.
You work-
it
you
looks
work
like
out
you're
as
like
much as I do.
a giant. I can't from where I'm looking. I wish you could see it. It's like you went to a barber shop, and you took the stuff that cleans combs and are just drinking a fucking vat of it. That's what it looks like.
Yeah, it's called biohacking, Keith. You got to drink Barbicide.
Oh, I know you've worked at Spartan. Get Jody I out of your ear.
Tell me more about the great writing, Keith.
You ruined my whole thing. I'm going to say one nice thing about this film. Well, you just flush out your insides.
I'm ready. I'm listening.
All right. I really like the writing of this film. It felt really gigantic. Put it down. Just put it down. I really like the writing. I think it's super sharp, very concise, and with a real nice wit to it. There was several lines that jump out at me, but I like to take notes of the lines that really make me chuckle or make me go like, that's good. And if I can remember it correctly, it was when I want to say it was Jake Gyllenhaal and it was Mark Ruffalo talking in one of their secret meetings, and Gyllenhaal says something about they had a painting party.
What's a painting party?
It's a party where people come and help you paint.
Sounds like a terrible party.
It sounds like a terrible party. It's not overstated. It's sharp. It's like a quick little like, yeah. It just makes me chuckle from its dry wit, and that there was many examples of that type of writing, which is a style of writing that I like. A nice, dry, sharp wit riddled throughout this film. So many lines of dialogue caught my attention in that way. So I thought the writing overall was really sharp.
Yeah, I wrote a couple lines down. I like the coffee and donuts guy at the Chronicle who calls Robert Downey Jr. a drunken reprobate, a drunken reprobate.
There you go, you drunken reprobate.
Which is a reprobate is a really great word.
What I don't even know what it is.
Google.
What help me?
I don't remember. I looked it up once. No, it's like it's not a deviant, but it's you're
I
like
can gather
you're no
from
good.
the context, but
Yeah, you're a drunken piece of shit,
vagabond,
basically.
perhaps.
A little bit.
Whatever.
And then obviously, yeah, there's little humor mixed in, but it is really subtle, which is good, because it shouldn't be overt, obviously.
Of course not.
I think my favorite scene, maybe. I mean, I love this movie, but I think my favorite scene might be when the three police officers visit Arthur Lee Allen the first time at his factory job and sort of question him. Mm-hmm. That scene is so tense, and the way it's directed with the perspectives, lots of directly into the camera. I think that's the only time in the movie that happens where it's very you're there, and it puts you in that chair. And all the performances are really subtle and really nice, and they're all just kind of playing this game.
Yeah.
And that point where John Carroll Lynch again kind of snaps into being evil and says like,
I'm not the Zodiac.
like when he says that and he like lowers his voice, you're like, oh shit. Like this is like, it's just really, I love that the slow burn of this movie is one of the things that I love about it that I'm sure a lot of people don't. But it's so,
Yeah. No one.
you really earn each thing that's given to you, and there's not that much given to you. So those little moments of realization, even if they're not 100% confirmed, are all the more valuable because it's like you're in a desert, you're getting a drop of water. Like, okay, here's just a little taste that this guy might be it, or this might give you just a little hope for resolution. And it just keeps stringing you along and stringing you along. It's beautiful. You wouldn't understand.
I wouldn't. I do think, I really do like that scene too. That is a stand from a directorial standpoint too. I really, really like the scene when they first confront him. Thought it was shot really well. I love the shot, the detail shots that they had of like the boot and the watch. It felt subtly placed, and I felt accomplished in sort of piecing it together. Like, that's the boot. Oh, that's the watch. Before they really in the story started to make mention of it, like that made me feel like I was part of that scene from a directorial standpoint, which I really, really liked.
I think that the filmmakers, like we mentioned, obviously believe that Arthur Lee Allen is most likely the killer.
Alleged.
And I'm inclined to believe them because I think I have a tremendous respect for David Fincher as a director, a filmmaker, and a storyteller. And I was reading that he and his screenwriter for this and some of the producers really researched this case very exhaustively for a year and a half plus and brought in the two surviving victims and brought in Dave Toschi and obviously worked with Robert Graysmith and they were really painstaking in their efforts and their care to tell this as truthfully as possible.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to question, I have no reason to question based on me, you can get on any fucking message board on the internet and type in Zodiac and read 500 different theories that are all very convincing, but I defer to the genius of David Fincher. Okay, so I love this movie, you hate this movie, we couldn't disagree more on structure and overall enjoyment. You think it lasts forever. I think it really zips by. It never feels its length to me because it's so fascinating. So I guess we'll just agree that you're a moron and disagree. Any final thoughts, Keith?
No, you make me sick.
Yeah, that's fair. Feelings mutual. You son of a bitch.